Canelo has every element that's required to be the greatest, because he is the greatest of our era. And when you're the greatest, the way that he does it, it's only a matter of time.
Pound for pound, is he number one in your opinion?
Yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Because a lot of people would say, no way, Sean. Terrence is. Terrence has to be number one.
Canelo's number one.
He mentioned that if he were to face Floyd right now, he'd knock him out. He just did an interview yesterday.
I believe that.
You believe that, really?
do.
A lot of people are like, nah. Like, even me, I'm kind of like, I don't know, dude.
I believe that. I don't know if
Said
he
prime
would.
for prime. If Floyd in his prime, him, because a lot of people are like,
And let's
what
keep
are
it
you-
real, like Floyd.
you fought Floyd in his prime. Look what he did to you.
And Floyd is like pretty much still in his prime. Like that dude has done. He's done some amazing things. I don't think that I really gave him the respect and credit that he should have gotten years ago. In his prime Canelo and prime Floyd, prime Canelo, I don't think knocks out Floyd, but definitely gives Floyd his toughest fight.
But I want to ask your opinion on Canelo Alvarez. It seems like he's at a point where, people don't want to give him credit for anything. Now, granted, the last mandatory fight, people weren't happy with that. But he's fighting Billy Joe Saunders, and if he beats him, he is trying to fight Caleb Plant to unify 168. And people still looking past that, saying, well, he can't beat Jamal Charlo. Do you think that Canelo Alvarez is unbeatable at 168? Meaning, do you see anybody beating him at that weight class?
My thing is, he shied away from Jamal Charlo and Demetrius Andre for a long time. And when you look at Canelo's career, it's like he's shying away from the black fighters. I think the black fighters is the ones that give him the most problems. Boo been getting, railroaded for a long time now. Yeah. He's been champion and nobody's been trying to fight him, so it's a reason.
It's definitely two guys that probably should have had to. But I'm saying, do you see Canelo beating?
I wanted to talk about Shawn Porter's recent statement about how he said that Canelo Alvarez is the greatest fighter of this era and the unquestionable pound-for-pound fighter. I wanted to see, what did you think about that?
Just to make it clear, he said the best fighter of this era?
Yeah.
Help me understand, what is an era?
I mean, I'm pretty sure that's a pretty long period of time.
That's a long period of time.
Pretty premature.
Are we talking about a long time?
2 years, I guess, for Canelo. I mean, I guess an era now has dropped to maybe 1 or 2 years if you're talking about Canelo, but if we're talking about an era,
right,
I would say about 10, 15, maybe 20 years.
Exactly, 20 years, a whole career. Like when you talk about an era, it's like a whole career, right? So if we're going to talk about a whole career, Are we talking about to the future? 10 years, 20 years to the future? Or are we talking about 20 years to the past? So when Shawn Porter says Canelo Alvarez is the best fighter of this era, I agree with him. Canelo Alvarez is the best cherry picker of this era. He's the best European assassin of this era. He's the best fighter against Europeans of this era, if you want to call him that. But it's really premature to call a guy like Canelo the best fighter of this era. If we're talking about the future, that's absolutely ridiculous because you got to include fighters like Shakur, and we know what he's capable of. So if we're talking about a prediction, that's nothing factual. And if we're talking about what he already did, like the best fighter of this era, Canelo started his pro career in 2005. That's 16 years ago. Floyd Mayweather was active in his prime at the time, and Manny Pacquiao was terrorizing divisions at the time. Manny Pacquiao is still fighting to this day. So when you say Canelo is the best fighter of this era, you some way, somehow placing him above Manny Pacquiao and Floyd Money Mayweather, which is absolutely laughable, if you ask me, because we know Floyd Mayweather mopped the floor with Canelo when Floyd Mayweather was a grandpa, when he was an old man, and Canelo was entering his prime. He was already in his prime. And I already made it clear on a video talking with you, which I'm gonna leave it in the comment section below, because like I said before, Mike Tyson was undisputed at 21 years old, the baddest man on the planet at 21. But Canelo's not ready at 23. Floyd Mayweather was the best version of himself at 23. So Floyd Mayweather at his worst beat Canelo entering his best, or at his best. So for Shawn to make a comment like that, It's absolutely ridiculous to say Canelo is the best fighter of this era, ignoring Andre Ward, ignoring Floyd Money Mayweather, ignoring Manny Pacquiao. All these fighters mop the floor with Canelo Alvarez. When it comes to their resume, when it comes to their dominance, when it comes to them fighting the best, coming off their biggest wins, when it comes to more accomplishments, you name it. Canelo doesn't even compare. He's not even on the same pedestal as a Floyd, Manny Pacquiao, or even an Andre Ward. So for Shawn Porter to say that, knowing that his best friend, Demetrius Andrade, have been avoided by Canelo for the past 7 years, to this day. Canelo Alvarez was Andrade mandatory at one point. Canelo didn't have a belt. He was Andrade mandatory. He refused to fight the champion, Andrade, when Andrade called him the B word. But some way, somehow, this same guy, Canelo Alvarez, who fights fighters coming off their worstest performances, fights Avini for Benavidez belt, who's coming off a loss and 2-year layoff. He's some way, somehow the best. The best against Europeans, because last time I checked, he ain't fighting no undefeated Black American fighters. And the last time he fought one was 9 years ago when he lost to Floyd Money Mayweather. He avoids that style to this day. Last time I checked, Canelo Alvarez, he doesn't fight undefeated Mexican fighters either.
Canelo, why don't you like fighting Mexican fighters?
Because I represent Mexico.
Interesting.
That's why,
okay.
That's why.
All right, Canelo.
The reason why he said he don't want to fight his people. We see when Benavidez, undefeated Mexican, a guy that could fight his ass off, when we talk about him, Canelo, he don't like to fight Mexicans anymore. But when it's Chavez, the same size as Benavidez, just a poor version of his father, Canelo, he entertains that fight all day, every day. He fights Lopez, a guy 2 weight divisions smaller than him. He fights Angulo. But this guy, you telling me, is the best fighter of this era when he's not even the number 1 pound for pound today, because Terence Crawford is undisputed number 1 pound for pound, without a question. In fact, Shawn Porter, as Terence Crawford mandatory, avoided him. So this is what Shawn Porter doing, in my opinion. I think Shawn Porter is trying to take attention away from himself for avoiding the number 1 pound for pound, Terence Crawford, because I dropped a video on that, which I'm gonna leave in the comment section below. Shawn Porter, ever since he lost to Errol Spence, he been screaming out, Terence Crawford, Terence Crawford, Terence Crawford. Crawford responded by saying, listen, you never mentioned my name when you had a title. When you lose your title and now you're coming off a loss, now you want the fight? Okay. He said, we'll see. The moment Shawn Porter became Crawford mandatory, his team told Shawn Porter, go ahead, activate your mandatory. Petition to fight the champion. Don't do what Danny Garcia did and wait your mandatory out, have someone else replace you. Petition to fight the champion. They told Shawn Porter that. And Shawn Porter didn't move. He said he wanted to listen to his team. He kept talking. He said he gonna knock out Terence Crawford, but he didn't follow it up with action. So Shawn Porter, he want to call Canelo the best in the world while avoiding the real number 1 pound for pound, the best in the world, Terence Crawford. That's what I'm seeing at the moment in time. I just see a whole lot of deflection going on because, see, Errol Spence did the same thing with Terence Crawford. Errol Spence, he said Canelo's number 1. Because if he told the truth and said Terence Crawford is number 1, now all pressure will be on Errol Spence to fight Terence Crawford. Because everyone will tell Errol Spence, if you think Crawford is number 1 pound for pound, why don't you fight him next? Why are you saving him for last? We don't care about the other side of the street. We don't care about the split, because obviously Errol Spence never brought up the purse splits when he called out Canelo. Errol Spence never brought purse splits when he talked about Keith Thurman in the past, but he brought up purse splits when he talking about Crawford, because they all know who the real smoke is. They know how good Terence Crawford is. So what I'm saying essentially is, you see Shawn Porter claim Canelo the best. You see Errol Spence claiming Canelo the best, because they know if they say it's Terence Crawford, a fighter in their division that's undisputed pound for pound number 1, then the pressure will be on them to fight Terence Crawford ASAP. They don't want that type of pressure on them. And then they obviously want to cater in to the decafs. And mainly Shawn Porter at the moment in time, he want to cater in to the Canelo fans to be accepted. But at the end of the day, I will always tell the truth before I sell out, especially with someone with Shawn Porter caliber. It's obvious it's a biased opinion, and it's a fact that Canelo is not the best fighter of this era because Floyd Mayweather whooped him and mopped the floor with him. Canelo is Floyd Mayweather's easiest fight. And Manny Pacquiao is a better fighter than Canelo and even Andre Ward. So what are we even talking about? Canelo, he's still ducking Demetrius Andrade, Shawn Porter best friend, and Charlo to this day for the past 7 years, including David Benavidez. So again, I just think he want to cater in to the casual fans more so to the Canelo fans to be accepted. But I just think that's the wrong move to make. What's your take on that?
Yeah, the thing is, I was a little shocked to hear Shawn Porter say this, considering the fact that for the longest time, I would imagine that he would have given the props to Terrence Crawford. But like you said, that would have just put pressure on him. So he's most likely doing this probably to just get the attention and heat off him, because I know there's a lot of heat on him since his recent comments about the mandatory and everything like that. So I don't know if his feelings are genuine. I don't imagine that they are, considering his actions towards Terrence Crawford, how he hasn't really been interested in fighting Terrence Crawford. Like, contrary to what he says, how he wants to fight him, his actions are saying the complete opposite. And the way he avoided explaining himself regarding his mandatories also just furthers that. Yeah. So you already know, man, with Shawn Porter, as much as I had respect for him in the past, and even still now to an extent, it just doesn't look good on him. And with Errol Spence, Errol Spence, I don't even want to get into that, to be honest, because if I get into Errol Spence, I'm just going to remind myself of how when he was asked about fighting Terrence Crawford this year, he talked about it briefly and then just deflected to talking about a potential fight with Canelo Alvarez, who is 3 weight classes above him. So,
but when he mentioned Canelo, he didn't say, if it ain't 50-50, I ain't fighting Canelo. And remember, he moving up 2 divisions. So that's like a hell of a disadvantage. You better ask for 50-50. But again, when you really want the fight, you're not going to try to negotiate publicly. You only make a crazy demand when you don't want the fight. So again, I do have a lot of respect for Shawn Porter as a fighter, but I lost a whole lot of respect for Shawn Porter with what he did with Crawford, the stunt he pulled, because it looked like a whole lot of clout. And then turn around and just try to cater in to the decafs and making a statement that's just absolutely false. And that's a fact. The truth is, Floyd Mayweather and Manny Pacquiao are the best fighters of this era. Manny Pacquiao is still active till this day. And then when he talks about Manny Pacquiao, he says Manny Pacquiao is the best fighter. And then when he talks about Canelo, he says Canelo is the best fighter. Now, which one is it? You can't have it both ways. So it just lets you know he just, in my humble opinion, I just think he's trying to take attention away from himself with the stunt he pulled against Crawford. But again, you should always tell the truth before selling out or catering to the fans, because it's a fact that Floyd is better than Canelo because Floyd beat Canelo. Canelo is Floyd's easiest fight. Floyd got better resume, so on and so forth. Manny Pacquiao and Andre Ward. So that's a false statement that's mind-blowing to hear from a guy like Shawn Porter. That comment alone lost some more respect point in my book. So I got a question for you. Can you name 3 things Canelo is doing right? That's the problem. When you can't name 3 things off the dome that Canelo is doing right, that's the problem. Because he's destroying the sport cherry picking. Can you name 3 things that Canelo's doing right? Because I'm having a hard time doing that. It would have been easier if he would have said, name 3 things that Canelo is doing wrong. I could have easily said, oh my God, eating contaminated meat, cherry picking, avoiding Charlo, Benavidez, Andre. I could have gave you a whole book. Canelo is the pioneer of the NBF belt, the witness protection franchise. So I could have gave you a whole list. So can you name 3 things for this fella that Canelo is doing right?
Naming 3? Damn, that's a lot. You asking for a lot here, man. I can maybe give you 1, and that's like a decent thing, and like that's fighting Billy Joe Saunders. But then again, what's the bad thing he did? The bad thing is that he almost made that fight not happen with his unwillingness to give the simple things like a regular ringside. So the thing is with Canelo, if there's a potential good thing, there's a bad thing that comes along with it. Like, yeah, I could say Canelo fought Triple G, but I could also say Canelo tested positive for steroids. I could say Canelo fought Floyd Mayweather, but Floyd,
he got dominated. He didn't even make the fight competitive, close, and he was entering his prime at his bullyweight division.
Exactly. And the thing is, like Floyd Mayweather, I recently saw this today. He was asked about Canelo's comments recently about when Canelo said he would knock out Floyd Mayweather in his prime. That Floyd Mayweather made, it was a good jab at Canelo. He's like, well, first off, I like to point out the fact that when I beat Canelo, I didn't fight him in my prime. So before Canelo can even say, fight me in my prime, he didn't. I beat him out of my prime. So, and Canelo was coming into his prime. Floyd Mayweather stated this, and I'm thinking, I didn't even think about that. Before Canelo can even say he would beat Floyd Mayweather in his prime, can you even beat the Floyd Mayweather that fought you out of his prime? Can you even do that, Canelo? Because you sure as shit can't.
Right.
Mayweather is, no doubt about it, in my mind, in Mosley's mind, in anybody's mind now, that he is the best. He keeps on proving it over and over and over again. And tonight convinced me, I have to say the truth, convinced me that he is the best. Possibly, there's obviously a lot of people who will say and who can argue this, but of all time, Mayweather has the skills to beat anybody. He has the talent, he has the work ethic, and people all over the world are becoming fans of the talent he possesses, so we really have to commend him for that. He fought a fighter in Shawn Losing that was supposed to be the most dangerous fight of his career, and Mayweather showed us why he's the best. Well, yes, I did fight all three of them. Shane Mosley and Pacquiao. I have to be truthful with you. Mayweather is on a different level. He's on a different level because he's a student of the game. He will dissect you outside the ring and finish you off inside the ring. He knows how to get in your head. He knows how to beat you mentally, and then he will beat you physically. And yes, he can wait for you to make mistakes. And me, a student of the game, Pacquiao makes many mistakes, and that'll fall into Mayweather's hands with no problem. Easy.
In your opinion, who is the greatest boxer of all time?
I'm gonna go with Floyd.
Floyd Mayweather.
Yeah, but I want to go with Ali from the things that he's done, as far as like the movement.
You can pick one.
I'm gonna go with Floyd.
Why?
Look what he's done in the game.
50-0, made money.
It ain't even just about the 50-0.
16 champions in a row.
He's smart. He's smart. I mean, I like smart fighters.
I'm gonna have to go with Floyd as well. I grew up on him. He beat how many? I can't.
20 something, 26 champions overall, but 16 in a row.
You know that says it all right.
So you say both said Floyd. What do you think?
I'm about to snatch your head.
I agree with him.
You agree? Floyd Mayweather is the best of all time. The GOAT.
Yeah.
Why?
In the sport. Yeah. And like he said, it's not talking about outside the ring or stuff like that. Just strictly boxing. Floyd has the ability to adjust to anything in between rounds. That is very difficult to do. He can switch a fight from one round to another. For fighters, we have to train for a fight, specifically
a certain style, yeah.
Fight for what, 8 weeks, 7 weeks? But Floyd can do it in between rounds.
No,
That's amazing to do.
That's the ability to adjust.